Good evening, everybody. Great to see you all on here. Tech Talk Tuesday, number 172, is live right now, Tuesday, 6 o'clock Eastern, and we are 5 o'clock Central. Hey, Charlie, thank you for tuning in. All right, let's get some more of you guys signed up. I got some really cool stuff I want to share with you today. It's all going to be neat. Joshua, how you do, sir? You can see the stuff that we're going to spend a little bit of time on here. And I'm going to talk about an assortment of things. We're going to talk about valve train. We're going to talk about rings. We're going to talk about springs. And I'm going to let you look at this and let you sign up. Hey, Mike. Hey, JJ. I'm going to go get a, let's see, John, JJ. How y'all doing? Yeah, man, we're ready. Let's sign you up. Come on, bring it in. Let's get a few more folks. Hey, Graham. Hey, Joshua. Hey, Brian. Hey, Tim. Thank you all for signing up. This is going to be a lot of fun. On time. Look at you go there, Ed. Yep, this is going to be good. This is, like I said, Tech Talk Tuesday, number 142. I'm going to talk about a few rules of engine building, and I've covered some of this before. I had a good friend tell me the other day, he said, you know what, George? You've got 172 weeks of Tech Talk Tuesday here. He said, you know, some of the old stuff that you did at the very beginning didn't get seen by some folks. Plus, it'd be, hey, Jack, hey, Charlie, hey, Buddy, Tim, Brian. Look, it'll be better this time because I'm a little bit better at it. Maybe I don't know the right word, it's called polished. But I have a little bit better understanding on how to do this with you and not waste so much time jacking around. So we're going to maybe recover a few tracks, but you won't get bored because we got some really neat stuff. I got, Jackie got me a new super cheap gram scale, and that's not a gram scale. That's a gram scale. Hi, Graham. I mean, like this, they'll check some little teeny stuff. I mean, like you can check one lock, 0.49, and two locks, it's 0.97. Look how skinny that thing I get. That's pretty good for a little cheap scale. We'll play with it for a second. Here's a stock steel retainer for the Milwaukee 8. Looks like a juicy evening. Yeah, look at that, 6.27, and the titanium super tiny, that's twice as strong, it's 3, look at there, half the weight, isn't that great? And then the stock valve spring, 52.3 grams, 52.3 grams, and watch this, and I'm going to say it where you can hear me, 36.4, that is way less. Missing a coil, smaller in diameter. Look at that. I'm going to tell you this, though. This is part that's not really understood. The weight of the spring doesn't count as valve or retainer weight. 30%, maybe 25 or 30% of the spring's weight counts towards valve control because itself. This spring works harder than this spring because it has to lift itself. It's like me doing push-ups. If I weighed 150 pounds and I had the same muscles, I believe I could do more push-ups than this guy. He weighs 200 pounds and has the same muscles as this guy. So it's going to be interesting. Again, look at that spring, y'all. 52.3. 36.4. Very consistent. So I wrote down some numbers. I'm not going to bore you with this. But the star springs, I think they were 36.4. The star locks were 0.96. The stock locks were 0.96. The star retainer was 3.0. The stock retainer was 6.2. Stock spring was 52.2. The star spring was 36.4. The Star Racing titanium valve was 42.3, and the stock little baby valve was 54.2. It's made out of some kind of steel. I'm going to say import steel. But if you'll look, you can see that we're going to have some big valves. This is the stock Milwaukee 8 valve. I think it's 40 millimeters. This one is 42.5. You can see how much bigger it is. But this is what really matters for valve control, is if this spring is strong, if this valve is strong enough to maintain its shape, maintain the seal. It has to be a strong valve. You don't want your valve to be as light as it can be. You want your valve to be as strong as it can be. Hey, Jerry. Hey, Eddie. Hey, David, Barry, Rusty, you guys, that's great. But listen to me, y'all. Again, we didn't knife edge this margin. We didn't make this too thin. We didn't dish it out to try and lighten it up. Same thing the stock guys did at Harley. Whoever they hired to do this valve, they put a pretty nice margin on it, got a really nice shape on the back, and they didn't dish it out because they wanted this to live. This is 20, 30, 40 years we've learned that making the intake valve as light as you can just wrecks the shape and the seal at high RPM. So we want a stout valve. We don't want the lightest valve, but we want one that's stiff and strong enough to maintain its shape and its seal. But watch this. This is interesting to me. What does that say? That says 54.2 grams. Stock steel spring, stock steel valve. Do it again. I talk too much. 54, almost 0.2. A stronger, bigger titanium valve. Let's let it heal itself. 42.2. That's what I wrote on my sheet. 42.2. Why is that important? Hey, Stevie Ray, Mark, Jim Bob. This right here, this valve is too heavy to turn 6,000 RPM, especially with these monstrous springs. These springs right here, the stock Harley springs, have too many coils. They're way too heavy. I mean, you can just feel it compared to the Star Racing spring. The Star Racing spring is a lot smaller. It has way better material, and it can live in there for like road racing at maximum RPM, 7,000, 8,000 RPM all day long, like an endurance engine versus this. Also, this one will go 640 lift. This one will go 500 lift. And I know I covered that last week, but I just never really got to talk about the weight difference. And I just want you to know this spring is working against itself because it's heavy. And it's 25 to 30% of the spring's mass counts towards valve weight. This spring, let's see, what is it? It is much lighter, 36.4 versus 52.3. So this has 25 to 30% of its mass counts towards valve weight. So I added them up for you. One more time. This is a weak stamped steel part that comes on the Milwaukee 8. It's good enough for 5,000. They set the rev limiter about 5,500 on them, and it has a really nice weight of 6.2 grams, which means it's weak and heavy. This is titanium. It has no flat edges. It is radiused everywhere. I wish you could see how beautiful this was on this film, but this is the coolest, smoothest. It's like a smooth, round river rock, and it's half the weight of the steel one, and it's twice as strong. So I added up all the stock parts. It was 112.6 grams. That means I'm only talking about the valve, the spring, the locks, and the retainer. These pieces weigh 112.6. I took the Star Racing version, the titanium big old valve, and the PSI silicone polished, the titanium retainer, and it was only 82.6. So I did, for the benefit of the doubt, I went in right here, just so you don't get too freaked out with the numbers here, but I took the weight of the valve and I did 30% of it is 10 grams. I took the weight of the spring, 36.4. 30% of that is 10 grams. I took the stock spring, 52.2, and I did 30% of it is 15.6. So counting towards the valve weight, the retainer weight, the lock weight and the retainer and the spring, we ended up saving 11.9, almost 12 grams. So I did this deal. Added all the stock parts up, 76.9 with the spring 30% figured in. I added up the Star Racing versions with the 30% of the spring figured in. It was 56.2. That's a 20 gram savings and 23% savings on weight. 23%. So that's crazy, y'all. Now you can run the same cam and run it 23% higher RPM, or you can run a really nice, well-designed camshaft with this really big valve, and you can spin it higher and higher and higher and maintain control because we have so much mass is reduced. Think about what the poor camshaft has to do. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the camshaft has to set the valve on the seat. It has to knock it off to full lift. Before it has to move really fast because the piston is going up and down 58 times a second at 6,000 RPM. The piston's going up and, the valve, intake valve is going up and down 58 times a second. The piston's going up and down twice as fast as that. But I'm sorry to talk too fast. Let me slow down. The piston's going up and down 58, 100 and something times a second, 116 times a second at 6,000 RPM. The valve, the intake valve, is opening 58 times a second at 6,000 RPM. So think about it. You don't have any time for this valve to be closed. You don't have any time for it to be open. You don't have any time for it to be closed. You don't have any time for it to be open. You don't have any time for it to be closed. Never mind getting open and getting closed and asking this valve spring to control it. When this valve comes back on the seat, bam, 58 times a second, bam, 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 bam. I can't even move it that fast. Valve goes up and down 58 times a second, and this valve spring is trying to contain it and control it. So we need some really, really nice parts here to be able to do that. That's what I'm trying to offer up with this kit. So when you guys see me with this expensive valve spring kit that bolts into a Milwaukee 8, it's to have all these correct parts that will turn 8,000 RPM and live for the 24 hours of Daytona or the 24 hours of the French race, the Le Mans, and also be able to go to Sturgis and back 100 times at full throttle. Okay, now I want to tell you guys something else that just bothers me, and I've heard it all week, and I wanted to tell you guys. Curtis, Derek, Jack, I just want to tell y'all some stuff that's just a little bit bothered me because it shouldn't bother me, but I've been doing this for 40-something years, and I want to say out loud that I was very fortunate to be able to get paid to do this. I got paid to do this. My day job, I went in every day with my time card, and I punched in. It said, find 1 more horsepower today. So we had 3 dynos. We had 2 engine dynos and a chassis dyno, and I had a full crew of folks that worked at Star Racing, and they were really, really good at it. So what we did was we went in with 200 horsepower, and we worked all day till we got 201. Next day, we found 202. Next day, we found 203. That was my day job. Yes, we did a lot of work for other people, but we got paid. I mean, we were Team Winston for 4 years, and we got paid by the month to make the motorcycle go faster and win more rounds, and we did. I'm not saying it was the good old days. I'm just saying it was the old days. But guess what we learned? Woo! We learned how to make an engine, make some power, and go fast. And it doesn't care if it's a motorcycle, a V8 or Chrysler Ford. It doesn't care. This piston right here, this piston is 4.6 inches bore, and these rings are made by Total Seal, and this is a dart and sleeve made out of their really nice stuff. And this piston, when it's going up and down 58 times a second at 6,000 RPM, 58 times a second, 116 times a second. This piston goes up and down 116 times a second at 6,000 RPM. It doesn't know if it's in a motorcycle. It doesn't know if it's in a car. It doesn't know. It doesn't know if it's air-cooled. It doesn't know if it's water-cooled. It doesn't know. It just knows that it's hauling butt and it's trying to maintain ring seal. So when I make my list of the top 10 things that matter on engine design, That's what that big cylinder's going on, in case you wondered. In case this is your first day, I like to get the bore as big as I can that will fit the head gasket and the rings available. I call Total Seal first and say, hey, do you have rings for a 4-point blah, 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 or a 5-point whatever? And if they say no, but it'll cost X amount of dollars and this many months to get them, then I say, okay, well, what do you have close to this? And then I go backwards and do the math and figure out the stroke. Bore first, rings, head gasket, base gasket, then I go figure out the stroke. Now, the stroke only needs to be whatever it needs to be the size of the engine I want. The bore is the biggest it can be. I don't care, 4-inch, 3-inch, 5-inch. The bore needs to be, this is my opinion. The bore needs to be the biggest it can be to fit in the architecture of the engine. The stroke needs to be however big you need it for the cubic inches of the engine to be right times how many cylinders you have. This one is 4.6 times 4.375 times 2 equals 145 cubic inches. And if that was a V8, we would be 145 times 4. It would be a 580 cubic inch V8. That would be a 4.600 big block with a 4.375 stroke. And I want to talk to you about this order. Next, I'd be worrying about cam timing based on how much the heads, how much air I can move, what's the area, how big are the valves, how much area can I move in and out. I'd worry about ring seal because whatever I get here and whatever I get here and here doesn't make a hill of beans if you don't have this. I don't care if you got CFE Pro stock heads that cost $27,000 a pair and some kind of Hogan manifold or whoever makes the most nicest billet Frankenstein looking thing you can get, or a HPI or a Screaming Eagle or whatever your trick of the week is on your intake manifold, your throttle body, your air cleaner, your exhaust pipe. I don't care whose pistons, what kit, what stroke. I don't care if you got a 700, 800, or 1.400 cam. If you ain't got this, and I'm talking country, let me say it right so Jackie and Julie be happy. If you don't have really good ring seal, everything from this line up is nothing. It is just a lot of heat and smoke. Ring seal is what makes the pressure. When you light this off in here with the spark plugs, this engine has 2 spark plugs, one here, and it has a compression release in the middle. It looks like 3 spark plugs, but I just want you to know, when you light this off and it goes boom, everything in there will go past that piston if you don't have this guy sealed up right here. Now, after a ring seal, and how important all these are, and you can jumble this around, the top 5 are going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The top 5 are going to be, well, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You can just about tumble them and pick out the one you want next. But if you're going to have a 500-inch engine, you got to have the biggest bore will fit the block and the shortest stroke to get 500 inches. If you're going to have the most flow you can get and the biggest valves and the biggest airflow in and out of the engine, you got to have a giant lift cam, and you got to control how many times the valve goes up and down to fill this up, this big bore and stroke with this big area, and seal it. That's why these over here are so important. Spring. I know I'm talking a little elementary here, but I just want to get this concept out in front of you. So whatever 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, down here about top 20 is rod length. So I'm going to ask you this. What would you rather have? Would you rather have the rod length you want based on some book or some math formula we saw on the internet that says 1.7, 1.6, 1.8, 2 to 1, 2.1 to 1, 1.5 to 1, 1.4 to 1? What rod length do you want? Because you've got to sacrifice this and this to get this. So these are so much more important than this, that this comes in last place, and I'll explain in a minute. Over here, I call it ring real estate. Look at me mess that up. Not seal estate. That would be a great name for it. Real estate. That is the area you have between the wrist pin, bore, and the top the compression height of this piston. This is the ring real estate. And we get to put a big backyard, we get to put a big house, we get to put a small front yard, and then we got this and this and this. But there's whatever you add up here on what you want, the top ring, the second ring, and the oil ring. And how much ever room you have between all of these. Let me jack this up a little bit so I can show it to you better. Hold tight, here we come. Nope, it's better down here because of the glare. I'm gonna leave it right here. I hope y'all can see it okay. Top land. This job is to put this top ring somewhere out of the fire. Up against the fire, down below the fire so it can not get too hot. And also every bit of heat that goes in this piston. Boy, that wrist pin's nice in there. Inside of this piston it's going to be glowing red, and the heat has to go through this ring to get to the cylinder wall, which uses all these fins to radiate the heat out of the cylinder. This is what we call an accumulator groove, and that's a little bit more complicated. When this leaks, which it will, at some point the combustion pressure will get by that top ring, and it will come down in here, and it's going to try and build up on top of the second ring, and when it does, it will create so much pressure on top of this second ring that it will lift this top ring off of the land, and when it does, the rest of the pressure in the combustion chamber comes on through. So it's important to have this accumulator groove, which is our expansion chamber, or as our storage tank for whatever leaks by the top ring. If your pistons don't have a compensator groove, a accumulator groove, not a compensator groove, that's another part, George, you sell that though. It's called an accumulator groove. Please let me be complete with this statement. It accumulates, it's an accumulator. That's a storage tank to build up so that it can fill in all this area all the way around this piston to not have to lift this top land off. A guy just asked me, what about compression height? Well, this is the total center of the wrist pin to the top of the piston. The compression height is dictated by the real estate you have to work with. If you're building this whole area based on some rod length you want, I need 5.7s, I need 6.125s, I need 6.350s, I need 6.7s, I need 8-inch rods, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you're building this piston based on a rod length that suits your rod ratio, yeah, that's what it looks like. My opinion, you're putting the cart in front of the horse. You need to get your real estate figured out where you can do a good job with your top 10 ring seal, top 5 ring seal, and then worry about this later. And I'll tell you how we do it. You've got to have a certain amount of real estate above the top ring to put it wherever you want it. And it's not just what you want. It's because of these pockets. These pockets, they go down into the top ring. These valve pockets, you have to have them because your cam timing's wrong. Or you got some really early opening, you got some really late closing on the exhaust, so you have to go over here and dig giant ditches all the way down in the piston 400, 500 deep because you got a goofy camshaft. I'm telling you, you don't have to open the cam that early. You don't have to wait that long to close the exhaust valve. That's old school 1950, 1960 stuff when the heads were stock cast iron heads. They had poor intakes, they had poor exhaust, and they had 300 degrees duration, 320 degrees duration because at that many RPM, there was nothing going in and not much going out, so you had to put the camshaft in there as long as you could, and it screwed the cam timing up, which also made the pocket so deep that it ruined where this top ring goes, and that's called the B dimension. When your valve pocket is in here, you got a deep valve pocket. Deep valve pocket. So that you can get this valve open so early that it gets into the way of the top ring that is running out of real estate for the B dimension. So I put my top ring as high as I can once I figure out where my cam timing is going to be, and I make the pockets as shallow as I can, and then I move this ring up against the valve pocket and have enough room in here for the B dimension. Then I make enough power on top of this ring that this land here is the only thing that holds this up. All 2,000, 1,000, 4,000, 10,000 horsepower on a top fueler, all the power that's inside this chamber, all the power that's above this ring is held up by this land. This land right here, the second ring land, it's the one that's the foundation for this house. If you don't have a strong enough second land, it doesn't matter how much power you got. It doesn't matter how much heads flow. It don't matter how much nitro or nitrous oxide or a boost. This is holding your house up, man. This is holding your house up. Next, after you figure out how much strength you need to hold the top ring land up, then you can put this oil scraper in. And the second ring is an oil scraper. Let me show you what a Napier ring looks like. It comes in here like this, and it has a taper on it, and then it has a hook. That's what this ring looks like. This is a scraper. A lot of folks, the old folks especially, we think this is a top compression ring and a second compression ring, but it's not. The top ring is barrel face like this, and it seals to the cylinder wall up and down. The second ring is a scraper. It's got a really sharp angle right here and a little hook. The hook lets this wear and wear and wear and wear, but it gives us a little reservoir to get this oil out of here. And before I go too far with it, I'm going to go to the oil ring next and tell you there's not much strength needed here. This land, the top land, the second land, the third land. This one's kind of like, this is the adjustable one. This is the one, once I get the wrist pin close to the oil ring and I get the top ring where I want it based on the B dimension on the valve pockets and getting the top ring out of the fire, then I can figure out where the second ring goes, and then the oil ring goes as close to the wrist pin as I can get it. And whatever's left, this is the bonus room. Right here, this land right here. It can be 60, 80, 100, 10, whatever. I wouldn't make it 10, but this right here is adjustable to get the real estate you need to do the job. And then when you add all this up, whatever's left is this guy. If you can't get a rod a different length, you need to change up, because that's what's important on high-performance racing engines. You don't want more rod than you need. It's just what's left when you have to put the head or the head gasket where you need it. Now, let's change over to the oil ring for a quick second. This is going to be a little bit difficult because I put this piston in this cylinder with only the oil ring on it. And this is a 14-pound oil ring according to Total Seal. And I'm going to attempt to display this. This is going to be a little bit hard on the deck, but I'm going to be careful. I slid this wrist pin in, and I got only the oil ring on, and I'm going to pull this up and down. Can you hear it? This takes 14 pounds. Pick this up. I have a fish scale that I'll show you next time. I hook it around the wrist pin, and I push this down, and I pull this fish scale up, and it says 14 pounds. That's how much oil ring I use, 14 pounds. And the guys that are using 6 pounds, 7 pounds, 10 pounds because it makes more power, get you some oil control, man. Now, I'm going to pull this piston out, and we're going to look at it. And I'm going to move this out of the way. There's the oil ring. This is 3 millimeter, 14-pound oil ring. And if you're going to build an engine like I'm building right here, your pistons aren't going to look perfect when you put the engine together. Your cylinders aren't going to look perfect when you put the engine together, because I do too much test fitting, custom fitting, trial fitting, try fit, make it fit, cut it, notch it. Look at all these marks on this cylinder right here where I had to cut for the other cylinder. I had to cut for the cases here, and I had to cut for the squirter to spray oil on the bottom of this. But this is a 14-pound total seal 3-piece oil ring. This is the top land I was telling you about. This gives me plenty of room for my intake valve pockets. The second land has the accumulator groove to build up the pressure that might get to the second ring if it leaks past the top ring. And then I have just this much room left to my oil ring, and I go 15 thou, maybe 20 at the most, where the oil ring sits on top of the wristband. And you guys ask me, well, what's the compression height? Well, when this is right, this is right, this is right, this is right, the B dimension's right, and the wristband's as high as you can get it, whatever this number is, and the center of the wristband equals your compression height. Okay? Now, how much stroke you got and your compression height and where your head gasket has to go, then you take a tape measure and you measure from the center of the wristband to the center of the crank, and whatever that number is, 5, 6, 4, 7, 8, how much ever inches it is, that's the rod length. More important things than worry about whether the rod ratio is between 1.5 and 2 to 1. Getting good ring seal trumps. Woo! What a word. Rod length and rod angle every time. Okay, I know I sound like I was on the tire. I enjoyed it. It was fun. Let's do it again next Tuesday. It will be Tech Talk number 173. May God bless y'all. Good night.